The following account was taken from real testimonies. Names and details have been altered for privacy.
I never planned to be on that bus. I was supposed to take the morning one, but I'd overslept in Pokhara after a night of cheap rum and mountain air. So when I climbed aboard the old blue Tata bus heading toward Kathmandu, the seats were almost full: families, monks, a few travelers, and me, the foreigner who thought he'd seen enough of the world to not be surprised by anything anymore. The road wound along the edge of the mountains, so close to the drop that sometimes you could look out the window and see nothing but clouds below. Rain had started around dawn, and by the time we hit the first checkpoint, the mountains looked like they were melting. The driver, a small man with tired eyes, kept tapping the steering wheel as if that rhythm alone could keep the road steady. I remember the smell of diesel, wet clothes, and cardamom tea. The kind of mix that feels eternal in places like this. At one point, the man sitting beside me leaned closer and said, "You travel alone?" I nodded. He smiled. "Then today, we all travel together." I didn't know then how strange, how heavy, those words would become. By noon, the rain had turned into something else. A wall of water hammering down from the sky. Rivers forming in places that had never known water. The bus slowed to a crawl. Every few meters, the tires slipped, groaned, and caught again. Outside, people were standing on the roadside, waving frantically, warning us to stop. But the driver didn't. He just kept muttering, "5 minutes more, the bridge is close." 5 minutes. That was all it took for the mountain to give way. The first sound wasn't the crash, it was silence. That heavy, unnatural pause when the world seems to hold its breath. Then, all at once, the road disappeared. The bus tilted, the left wheels hanging over the edge. And for a second, I thought, this is how it ends, not in fire, not in pain, just in gravity. People screamed, someone prayed, someone else just laughed, that hollow, terrified laugh that sounds like madness. The driver slammed the handbrake, and somehow, impossibly, the bus stopped. Half on the road, half suspended over nothing. I didn't move. No one did. The rain kept falling, the mountain kept shifting, and the air smelled like earth and panic. When I finally dared to look out, the road below was gone. A brown river now roaring where the path used to be. A landslide, a man shouted in Nepali. And suddenly everyone was moving, climbing out through the windows, grabbing children, sliding down the mud toward what was left of the road. I followed. My hands sank deep into the clay. My boots lost their grip, and more than once, I thought the mountain would take me too. When we reached the lower slope, I looked back. The bus was still there, half alive, like an animal refusing to fall. And the driver, he was still inside. When I turned back toward the bus, I could see the driver still gripping the wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes staring at something that wasn't there anymore. People were shouting for him to get out, waving, crying, but he didn't move. Then, slowly, the bus began to slide. The mud gave way beneath the rear tires, and with a long, low groan, the entire vehicle lurched forward. Someone screamed his name, but it was too late. The blue Tata bus, the one that had carried our laughter, our stories, our fear, slipped soundlessly down the side of the mountain and vanished into the mist below. No explosion, no echo, just gone. The man next to me, the one who'd said today we all travel together, whispered a prayer under his breath, his voice trembling. No one spoke for a long time after that. The rain kept falling. By late afternoon, the rain had weakened to a drizzle. We were 21 people left, stranded between two washed-out cliffs. Number signal, no vehicles, no road, just mud, fog, and silence. A few men tried to walk down the slope to see if there was another path. But everything below was just landslide debris, uprooted trees, boulders, and the steady rumble of water moving where a road used to be. Someone said there was a village 2 hours away, uphill. No one wanted to move, but staying meant waiting for another landslide. So we went. We walked in a line. Boots sinking ankle-deep in the clay, our clothes heavy, soaked, the air thin and filled with that metallic taste of fear. A woman carried her sleeping child wrapped in a shawl. An old man limped beside her. At one point, a boy offered to carry her bag. She smiled weakly. And for a moment, just a moment, the mountain didn't feel so cruel. We reached the village by nightfall, a cluster of 10 or 12 wooden houses clinging to the hillside, their roofs glistening under a tired, gray sky. An old man came out with a lantern and stared at us for a long moment before saying, "Road gone." We nodded. He sighed, then motioned for us to follow. They cleared space for us in what looked like a small schoolhouse. Bare floor, a few blankets, the smell of damp wood. Someone started a fire, someone else handed out tea. And for the first time since morning, people began to speak again. Quietly, gently, as if afraid their voices might wake the mountain. That night, no one really slept. The rain had stopped, but the earth still moaned every few minutes. Deep, shifting sounds that made the walls tremble. I sat near the fire, staring at the flames. The man who'd sat next to me on the bus was across the room. His face half lit by the glow, his eyes distant. He caught my gaze and said softly, "You think of the driver." I nodded. He smiled sadly. He did not run. Some stay with the road. Even when the road leaves. I didn't answer. But those words stayed with me, haunting, simple, true. When dawn came, the clouds began to break apart, revealing the edges of the mountains like old scars. From the schoolhouse window, I could see the valley below. A ribbon of brown water cutting through where the road had once been. Helicopters would come later, they said. The army might rebuild the road in a week, but time felt meaningless up there. That morning, we buried what we could: a torn seat, a piece of shattered glass, a driver's cap found in the mud near a broken guardrail. Someone whispered a prayer, someone else just cried. And when it was done, we stood there silently. 21 strangers who would never see that bus again, but would remember its sound for the rest of our lives. We stayed in that mountain village for 4 days. No cars, no news, no sound of engines, only the rhythm of rain sliding off rooftops and the occasional echo of rocks tumbling far away. It was strange how quickly life shrank to essentials: water, warmth, and silence. The villagers shared everything they had. A woman named Maya gave us blankets. Her son fetched buckets of water from a stream that smelled of moss and iron. They had so little, but they gave it like it was nothing. Every morning, I walked to the ridge where the road used to be. From up there, you could see the deep brown wound in the earth, a scar that would take years to heal. Somewhere far below, the bus still rested, buried under mud and stone. Each day, I left a small stone on the edge of the ridge. One for the driver, one for the road, one for the version of myself that had climbed onto that bus believing that control was real. By the 4th day, I realized I hadn't spoken more than a handful of words. There was nothing to say we were alive. That was both everything and not enough. On the 5th morning, the distant thump of a helicopter broke the stillness. Dust and leaves swirled in the air as 2 army trucks crawled their way up the mountain trail. When they reached the village, the soldiers looked at us like ghosts. One of them asked for names, to check against a list of survivors. He frowned when he got to mine. There were no foreigners on the list, he said. I was late, I answered. He just nodded, and in that quiet, tired gesture, I felt the whole truth of what we'd lived through. How thin the line was between presence and absence. Between a name written down and a name lost to the river. The road had been carved open again, barely, uneven. Just enough for us to walk single file along the new edge of the mountain. Each step sank into soft mud, each sound echoed through the valley. As we reached the turn where the bus had fallen, the air grew colder, heavier. Below us, I could see the remnants, a twisted metal half buried in the slope. Color faded but still recognizable, blue. No one spoke, even the soldiers looked away. It felt wrong to move past it, like walking over a memory that wasn't done breathing yet. By the time we reached the next checkpoint, the sun had returned. The world looked impossibly normal. Children playing by the roadside, women drying rice on wooden tables. As if the mountain's hunger had already been forgotten. But it wasn't gone for me. When I boarded a new bus, this one clean, steady, quiet. I caught myself glancing at the driver again and again. He smiled once, and I nodded back, pretending I wasn't counting the turns. Pretending I wasn't listening for the first sound of silence. Weeks later, back in Kathmandu, I found myself walking along the Bagmati River. Vendors shouted, bells rang, motorcycles roared past. Life had swallowed me whole again. But sometimes, when the wind carried the smell of wet earth, I'd remember that mountain road. And every time it rained, I'd think of the driver who refused to leave his bus. Not as a ghost, not as a hero, but as someone who understood something I didn't then. That sometimes, staying isn't about strength or fear. It's about belonging, even if the world beneath you is falling away. When I finally flew back home, the world felt smaller. The airplane windows framed the clouds, and I caught myself staring at them, half expecting to see a mountain ridge break through, to feel the tilt, to hear the rain, but the sky was calm, too calm. When the wheels touched down, everyone clapped softly, the way travelers do when they think relief can drown out memory. I didn't clap, I just sat there, hands still, listening to the soft hum of the engines fade, and realizing I wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. Friends asked what happened. I told them the storm, the landslide, the road gone. But words are too small for things like that. They nodded, said things like that must have been terrifying. Then asked about the food, the people, the views. And I smiled, because that's what you do when no one can follow you back to where you've been. You make the story smaller, easier to carry. You leave out the silence, the smell of earth breaking apart, the way the driver's hands refuse to let go. You say, yeah, it was close. But what you mean is I still hear it when it rains. A month later, I finally opened my travel journal again. Pages smudged, water warped, the ink fading at the corners. I flipped to the day of the storm. My handwriting was frantic, shaky, words spilling over one another. Rain, too heavy, road slipping, driver won't stop. Everyone shouting, river below us, mud everywhere. Then a gap, blank pages. And on the next one, a single line, written slower, we are still here. I don't remember writing it, maybe I did. Maybe someone else used my journal after I'd dropped it. But it didn't matter, the sentence felt true in a way nothing else did. We were still here, not unchanged, but surviving in fragments. Sometimes I dream about the road. It's always raining, the drivers humming softly. The mountains are alive with water and thunder. And for a moment, everything feels suspended, like time itself is holding its breath. Then I wake up, and the sound of traffic outside my window feels too normal, too solid, as if the world forgot what it can lose in a single minute. So I keep a stone on my desk now, a small, smooth one I picked up from that ridge in Nepal. It's gray, unremarkable, but when I hold it, I remember the weight of the rain, the trembling of the earth, the faces of strangers who shared silence like shelter. It's strange. I used to think travel was about escape, about seeing what's out there. Now I think it's about staying long enough to feel the ground shift beneath you, to understand that movement isn't safety, and that survival sometimes looks like waiting out the storm. The road washed away that day, but so did something else. My certainty that the world would always hold still for me. And yet, here I am, still moving, still walking, still listening for the sound of the rain on faraway mountains. Because maybe that's what it means to survive. Not to forget what happened, but to keep walking through it, step by step, until the earth steadies again. Months after I returned home, life found its rhythm again. Emails, deadlines, traffic, the endless chatter of days that blur together. But every time it rained, something inside me paused, a kind of listening. Not for thunder, not for wind, but for that hollow, rolling sound the mountain made before it broke. Once, on a gray morning in November, I was walking through a crowded street when a bus hit a deep puddle, and the splash echoed off the buildings. It wasn't loud, but it was exactly the same sound. For a moment, my breath caught. The world disappeared, replaced by mist, mud, and the sound of 20 voices shouting for life. I leaned against a wall until the noise of the city returned. And I realized the mountain hadn't really left me. It was there, somewhere, folded between the seconds of silence before rain. A year later, a letter arrived at my apartment. It was from Maya, the woman from the village who'd given us blankets that night. Her son had learned some English from volunteers, and he'd written on her behalf. The road is open again, the letter said. But when it rains, we all stay inside now. The mountain remembers. Inside the envelope was a small photograph. A stretch of new road winding along a green slope. Fresh asphalt glistening under the sun. And at the curve where our bus had fallen, someone had placed a stone marker painted white, with a simple inscription in both Nepali and English. For those who kept driving, I traced the words with my thumb. No names, no dates, just that. It felt perfect. 2 years later, I returned to Nepal. Not for adventure this time, just to walk. The air smelled the same, wet earth, smoke, tea. But the road felt different, wider, smoother, quieter. When I reached the marker, I stopped. The sun was setting behind the mountains. The air warm and heavy, and I could hear the river far below. For a while, I just stood there, listening. Not to mourn, not to remember, but to say thank you. To the mountain, to the road, to the strangers who became family in those lost days. I placed my stone beside the white marker, small, gray, and smooth. Then I whispered the words that had followed me all this time. We are still here. That night, as I made camp near the ridge, the sky broke open again. Rain fell in sheets, relentless and wild, but this time, I didn't run for shelter. I sat there, letting it soak through my jacket, feeling the earth beneath me tremble, and for the first time since that day, I didn't hear fear in the sound. I heard life, because maybe the road never truly washed away. Maybe it just changed its shape, becoming river, memory, story. And as long as someone keeps walking, it will always lead somewhere. When dawn came, the storm had passed, the sky over the Himalayas glowed a pale gold, and steam rose from the soaked earth like the mountain was exhaling. Every rock, every leaf, every scar of the land shimmered in that light. The kind of light that doesn't erase what happened, but forgives it, quietly. I packed my bag, folded the damp tarp, and, before leaving, turned once more toward the valley. Mist hung low where the road used to twist between the ridges. The new asphalt was darker, smoother. But beneath it, I could still feel the old road breathing. I took a deep breath and whispered. For the driver, for all of us who kept going. And then I started walking. The ground was soft, the air carried that faint sweetness of wet pine and ash. And for a moment, I felt the mountain steady under my feet. Not threatening, not fragile, just there. That's when I finally understood. The road doesn't vanish when it's washed away. It just moves, into the people who walked it. Into the stories that survive the silence. I smiled, adjusted my pack. And as I descended toward the valley below, the wind rose again. The same wind that once tore everything apart. Now pushing gently at my back, urging me forward. Weeks later, back home, I opened my notebook one last time. On the final page, I wrote, "The road washed away. But so did my fear of falling. Sometimes the earth must move. So we remember what it means to stand." Then I closed it, set it beside the small gray stone from that mountain, and let the rain tap softly against the window. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant campfires. And somewhere, maybe high in the Himalayas, maybe deep inside me, I could still hear it, the faint, steady hum of a road finding its way again.